Drinks, food, art, fun. This is Hops and Spirits Kentucky.
Another week is in the books, and we're moving on, and we're leaving the flight night, but we're staying in the bourbon world here on Hops and Spirits Kentucky this week as we talk with Catoctin Creek. And while they may not be in Kentucky in terms of where the distillery is located, they're in a Commonwealth, and at one time Kentucky was part of Virginia, so it's all relative if you think about it. But before we get into our interview, we got plenty of news and notes and a lot in the beer world this week. And we start with October Anniversaries for Kentucky's craft breweries. Against the Grain celebrated its birthday October 4th, Broken Throne on October 6th, 1020 celebrates October 20th, West 6 Nulu on October 28th, and Pivot October 29th are their anniversaries. And a couple events going on here soon. Gray Line Station and the Kentucky Guild of Brewers are hosting Brews and Bites, a beer and food festival on Saturday, October 22nd from noon till 5 p.m. in the parking lot of Gray Line Station in Lexington. You can get your tickets to sip on pints from 20 plus breweries from around the state. Tickets are $50 or $60 for VIP, which gets you in an extra hour from noon to 1 p.m. Designated drivers get a discount. You can find more information at graylinestation.com/brews-bites for more info and tickets. Louisville Beer Week is back with its inaugural Louisville Beer Festival at German American Club at 1840 Lincoln Avenue on Friday, October 21st. Tickets are $10 and include a commemorative tasting glass for beer samples. There will also be food and live music by the Lost Pockets. Louisville Beer Week will continue through Sunday, October 30th. And then in bourbon news, because yes, we do it all here, Blue Run Spirits will be investing about $50 million to bring a new whiskey operation to Georgetown. The project will create a 35,000 square foot distillery, a 20,000 square foot rickhouse, and about 45 jobs. So look out for that soon. And like I said, we've got a cool chat for you. Up next is our Q&A as we go beyond Kentucky. Yes, we go beyond Kentucky on occasionally. This time with Becky Harris of Catoctin Creek Distilling in Virginia. Hear how she and her husband launched this distillery that is focusing on Virginia rye whiskey. And yes, you can pick up a bottle here in Kentucky, so don't worry. Even though we are going to Virginia, you can still get their bottles and get to try what they have here in Kentucky. Enjoy.
Remember to check out Hops and Spirits on social media at Hop Spirits, all one word, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also find Hops and Spirits on YouTube and at hopspirits.com.
Joining us here on Hops and Spirits Kentucky for the Q&A. They're slightly beyond Kentucky, but you can find them on the shelves here in the Commonwealth, and technically they're in a Commonwealth too, so I guess it all works out. Please welcome in co-founder and distiller of Catoctin Creek Distilling, Becky Harris. Becky, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much. Excited to be here.
And did I say it right? Catoctin, right?
You absolutely did. You absolutely did. And honestly, back when Virginia started making rye, Kentucky was actually a part of Virginia, so we're all kissing cousins in this part of the country.
Two commonwealths that are making some good juice to put in some bottles, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But before I even get to that part, I always call this the Cliff Notes version. Just a little bit of background on yourself, not too much. I don't want to give away all your secrets just yet, but no. Nice little background.
An open book. So I'm a chemical engineer. I studied chemical engineering, way more years ago than I care to think about. And I started out working in a company that did polystyrene foam containers. And then I worked for a company that did copper and nickel plating on plastics. And then I worked for a company that made contact lenses. And so when my husband came to me in 2009 and said, hey, I was thinking we should do a distillery. I was like, I can learn to make whiskey because contact lenses are actually really hard to make. And I said, can we make money? Can you make money making whiskey? And that's still the biggest challenge, right? In this industry is converting it into money. Making delicious whiskey has been done by people in all walks of life, some in the woods, some in factories for, since the country was founded. So the business side is definitely the challenge. I am the head of production. Been working in that since 2009 as we grew our business and our brand.
Well, and your husband Scott, he couldn't come on. He's, I guess, handles the more numbers side on the for the business, and you get to do the fun part. Truthfully, I
Yes.
think. But
Yes, he would agree with that.
I was gonna say, I mean, but really, so this kind of just started on maybe not a whim, but him going, "Hey, let's do this," kind of the second career, something a little different. I mean, is that really
Yeah.
just as
Yeah,
simple as the conversation was?
100%. He likes to say that government contracting taught him a great love of drinking. So he had spent 20 years working in government contracts. So, like stuff for the Navy. And basically, when you're managing a government contract of a certain size, it's like running a small business. You basically have all the same things that they do. And so he, felt like he had the skills for that. And like I said, honestly, I was comfortable after working in all those different industries. I was like, I can learn this. This isn't going to be, um, of course, everything's harder than you think it is. It always looks easy from the outside, but it's been a really, really great ride. We've had good success and, made products that we're really proud of.
Well, and you touched on it. You're an engineer by trade, and that's really what people might not know, or they might know. I know, talking to folks, that's where a lot of the distillers come from. They come from some type of engineering science background, and then they go, you know what, that's fun, but this might be a little bit more fun. So, but I mean, how did that engineering background really help you, get into this and be able to distill amazing things?
I like to tell folks that, when you're in engineering, really, especially in chemical engineering, so much of what the curriculum was focused on, a lot of it was on, um, basically petroleum manufacturing, so what you're learning is you're learning a language, you're learning processes by which to make decisions and how to create repeatable processes. And so you know, distillation itself is not, rocket science, if you will. It is, something that's really well understood. So it's, how do you make it the same way every day? How do you really, create a process where you can make, good, solid product every day? You don't have a lot of problems. You are following all the regulations. You are operating, under the law and with, good sense of keeping your people safe. And all of that is really, engineering kind of a mindset. So it absolutely was right away a really good fit, because, and that was where I came up, was process engineering. So no matter what the process, I can build a way to keep it consistent. And so that was, really where we started off with it.
Now, I've got a really good question for you, and I think this really is cool to see. You weren't a big whiskey drinker, though. It wasn't like you had a big collection and got into it. This is something you've grown to love, I'm sure, over the time. But you weren't a big whiskey drinker.
No, I wasn't. I hadn't drunk. I really didn't drink much of, I wasn't a big beer drinker. I drank a little bit of wine. I knew enough. I had tried a number of different scotches, and that was kind of what my flavor profile was. But when I started, we decided to make rye because of the history of rye in Virginia, which was, really the deepest, one of the deepest things in this part of the country was the making of rye whiskey. And what I found was that rye was really a flavor profile that appealed to me naturally. It took me a long time actually to find the profiles of bourbon that I enjoy. There's a lot of bourbons that just don't hit me right. And that's, kind of how these, the what I always talk to people and tell people is that, you're tasting spirits and whiskeys or bourbons or scotches, whatever it is, it's all a exploration and trying to find what appeals to your palate. Everybody is individual, and just because somebody else loves something doesn't mean that it's going to be where you really react with that too. So it's fun to kind of encourage people to just take a chance on something, and take a chance more than once. Sometimes it's like, you get it's by thinking about, by exploring flavors, by kind of revisiting things under different conditions, that you really find, okay, what is it about this flavor that doesn't appeal to me? And then you can kind of parse that, and then you're like, oh, but this one does. And so, it took me a long time, but like I said, I started to find bourbons where I was like, oh, I really enjoy this. But still, rye's my baby.
I totally understand. That's one where when I first got into all this, I was like, yeah, rye, it's spicy. Now it's probably my go-to choice, and it's something that's super flavorful. And for you all, you mentioned going that rye whiskey route. It's interesting to me because not everyone, most places have a rye, but normally it's kind of maybe their second, second flagship, or it's a later addition. This is just basically, this is what you guys do. This is what you focus on, with a few other things as well. But this is the mothership. And is
Yeah.
it because of that history of Virginia? And can you maybe expand on that a little bit too?
Yeah, so as soon as people came here in Virginia, and one of the things they were talking about, like, before there was a United States, if you will, there were the colonies, and it was colonial, and it was agricultural. And when you look at the history of agriculture at that time, it was primarily tobacco. That's what folks are raising. Tobacco is really hard on the soil. It depletes the soil a lot. So what is paired with it? Growing rye. Rye can be used to, replenish the soil. And then you've got this grain, which you then can harvest, and it becomes a form of currency, a easy form of storage. And at that time, who was doing the distilling? It was women. It was women, because the men, whether they were free or enslaved, were all working in the fields because of the nature of growing tobacco and the way that it is incredibly labor intensive. And so the whole mid-Atlantic was drinking rye whiskey before there was ever a bourbon. And when you look at the time of George Washington, so some of your listeners may know that there is a distillery at Mount Vernon, and it's got 5 relatively small stills in modern terms. But at the time that George Washington was distilling, he had the biggest distillery in the colonies in the United States. And that was right after the Revolutionary War. And at that time, there were probably 13,000 distilleries in the United States, 3,500 in Virginia alone. For context, in 2009, when Scott and I started our company, there were 200 distilleries in the United States. Now there are 2,300. We still haven't gotten even close to the number of distilleries, which shows you how distilling in the early days of this country was really tied to the land in a way that it pretty soon moved away from. So as you started to move through into the 1800s and further, what happened was that distilling became less of a small agricultural project, and it became a volume project. And at that point, distilling was no longer the work of the women anymore. It was taken over by men. Stills are big machines now. And it became the work of men. And as with so many things in the US, because of the nature of, women in that economy, things weren't under their names, things weren't noted, that history was lost. And so it's, that changed. So when people are talking about, Pennsylvania rye, Maryland rye, all those kinds of those whiskeys that people think about, most of those that even exist in any form today were made late 1800s, early 1900s, in that time frame. They were not made at the time that I'm talking about. At that time, whiskey was mostly unaged. It was youthful. It, if it was barrel aged, it was not barrel aged long periods of time, because that was something that became a process during the industrialization of whiskey. And so, we were kind of inspired by that. So that's really where we looked at, okay, we're going to make rye whiskey. We're going to, source near us. And that was really nowadays, 10 years later, that isn't as big a deal. But when in 2010, 2011, when I would bring bottles of rye out and taste it at a whiskey show or at a bar, people would be like, this doesn't taste like rye. And our whiskey's made from 100% rye. So yes, it tastes like rye. But what was the phenomenon is that so many rye whiskeys were made in one or two large distilleries, whether they be in Indiana or Kentucky, but they're really large, and their whiskey is produced under a huge number of imprints, right? Whether, there was, at that time, there was actually a little like mini, kerfuffle, because people weren't, there is a rule that you have to label where the state of distillation, and a lot of people weren't doing that. But if you look on a whiskey bottle now and it says distilled in Indiana, despite where it says it's produced, it was distilled in Indiana, probably by MGP, which sells a tremendous amount of really good whiskey. But it isn't whiskey that reflects an agricultural place. It's sourced and merchant bottled, which is great. But what we wanted to do was talk about what is the flavor, the terroir, if you will, that comes from Virginia. And so we get we have a farmer down near Rappahannock River. He comes and brings us grain. We have another one that's coming from southern Pennsylvania. We're in the very tippy top of Virginia, so it's really close to Maryland and Pennsylvania. So we kind of pull from regional grain sources, and that really gives us the fermented here, distilled here, and that gives us that flavor that really speaks to what we are, which in my kind of tasting notes, if you will, we have that little spicy flavor of rye, but it's got a fruity note too. That's like, whether it be a cola or a cola notes or citrus notes on the mid palate, it should be really nicely balanced, but it isn't all about the spice. And that's really, I think, what was really challenging for folks at that time. And as we grew and kept seeing different things, I kept telling people, as a rye evangelist, if you will, what I was looking forward to was a time when I can go to California and I can taste a rye that was grown and made in California, and it tastes totally different than a rye that is grown and made in Virginia. You can go to, Sweden and taste one there, and all of them are going to have different character and different flavor. And I think we're finally reaching a point where you are starting to see that, mostly coming out of small distilleries. And that you can go and taste a number of different ryes, and they all have different personalities, just like different bourbons have different personalities and different scotches have different personalities.
But it's so true. I've talked to a few folks. I think of Ryan Lang at Middle West in Columbus, Ohio, talking about how, they source, they're kind of like you. They got the regional, but they found real quickly that you can grow the same grain in two different spots of the state and you get two vastly different products because of the climates, the soils, and things like that. And that's what you're talking about, is you're going to get different flavors and different things if it's grown different places. And it's really cool to see what those places can produce.
Right. And it's so much more, there are people who, say, oh, I wish I had been around, back in the 70s when bourbon was super cheap and super old and all that stuff. And frankly, I think that there's never been a better time to be a whiskey drinker, because you're seeing more innovative, different whiskeys coming out of small distilleries, coming out of big distilleries. And I'll tell you, the big distilleries are innovating more. Why? Because of the pressure they feel from small distilleries coming in and innovating. And that's a win-win for consumers and for and for distilleries. We're pushing each other toward increasing the excellence of the products that you're tasting.
Well, and it's really cool to see. And there's, like you said, there's some cool products that have come out. And yeah, you kind of touched on this because you mentioned that you guys have always been a distillery making your own stuff. I'm curious why that was sometimes that's the ultimate goal down the road, but that it sounds like you all started from that thought of that. Why was that so important to you all to not maybe source like others have to get off the ground, but to kind of make your own stuff and go your own route?
It was kind of one of the things we wanted to do was just kind of go with that. We started at about the same time as Bamber, so maybe that made us chumps. They grew a lot financed by the sourcing game, and they did it great. They did a great job. Really skilled merchant bottlers, but that really wasn't what we wanted. And so we kind of stuck with it, even when it, didn't make a lot of sense in some ways. But, we always felt that the flavor was worth it in the end. And so we just keep growing steadily, a little bit more every year, and trying to kind of, which in some ways has helped because we're kind of staying within our means and making these steps really thoughtfully.
And then obviously your name is unique. I'm sure you get it pronounced a million different ways, but it's
Yes.
Catoctin. And where does
Yes.
that name come from, and what does it mean, and why did you all decide on it?
It's a regional name. It apparently comes from, I believe it's Algonquian Indian name, and it means land of many deer, which, yeah, especially this time of year. But it is the Catoctin Creek run is all over our county in Virginia. There's a North Fork and a South Fork, and almost everywhere is within, 10 minutes of one of the branches. There's also Catoctin Creek in Maryland. The Catoctin Mountains are where Camp David is. So it's a really well-known regional name. So and honestly, it didn't even occur to us that it was hard to pronounce until we started to move outside of our region and we had to start telling everybody how to do it. So, but people learn to say lots of different Scotch names, so we figured they can figure this one out with our help.
Exactly. And it's a good starting point to, introduce folks to the whiskey when they're ever doing a tasting. It's a nice icebreaker. And you also do a lot of fun partnerships, whether that's the Ragnarok rye with the metal band Guar, or just with breweries and different things like that. Why are those so important to you, and just how much fun are they?
Oh, they're super fun. One of the neat things that we've done, and mostly, up until we partnered with Gore 2 years ago, it was mostly breweries, and it was kind of the kind of a partnership where it would be like, they reach out, they have something. The first one we ever did was one where a local brewery had tried to do Utopia's type of twice fermented concoction, and it didn't work, and they got stuck with this beer that was super sweet, and they came and said, hey, do you guys want to try distilling this? And we were like, okay, why not? And we did, and we got a couple barrels worth of it, and it was really, really amazing, and people loved it. And so we'd tag in with different breweries, kind of whether they'd have something that didn't have the clarity they wanted, and they wanted to kind of just try to see what they could make out of it, or whether they specifically chose to distill some, or to brew something for distillation. Either way, we kind of would come up with different things, and then we co-brand that release and have it, every year or so we release a different malt whiskey that comes out of these beer collaborations, and those are a lot of fun. And we have one coming up in the next month or so that's called Harper's Malt. It's made with Dew Claw Brewing out of Maryland, so that's going to be fun. But yeah, 2 years ago, we actually got connected with the metal band Guar through mutual, connections. Guar is, I guess, a crew of intergalactic alien travelers who came here to Earth. They found that it sucks. They don't like anybody. They, throw people into meat grinders in their concerts, and it's all very kind of the opposite of what we do, but they kind of came out of the punk scene and have a very do-it-yourself kind of ethos. And so they felt that there was a real connection with kind of the way that we came up, which was kind of, we built this distillery, we did it ourselves, kind of figuring it out and making it work as we went along. And so they came and talked about doing a whiskey. And so, we did kind of came up with the concept. They created the label art. We had the idea of making their, the band members, the alien heads on top of the bottles, a la like a Blanton's type topper. And then this year was another release. So they had their album release. So we took the album art and adapted it. So it's really, really cool. If you look it up, you can look it up at catoctincreek.com. There are pictures of the Ragnarok rye, and and Gore has been a lot of fun to work with. They are really, they're a bunch of they consider themselves an artist collective. So for them, it's about the art and what we can do together to kind of make something fun. So it's been a fun collaboration, and the whiskey's great, and the packaging is all out there. So check it out if you haven't seen it. It's really cool.
Well, sometimes the best things come from those unexpected relationships, and how fun they can be. And you touched on this earlier. You guys have slowly been growing and building and getting bigger. How has the expansion and upgrades to the distillery gone over the years, and where you're at now?
We really try to grow thoughtfully. It's the one of the challenges in the whiskey industry is that, as you're growing, you're basically putting it's an inventory problem, right? People carry inventory, and inventory gets expensive. You can drive yourself with enough inventory, you can drive yourself right out of business. So you have to be really thoughtful about the way that you grow and the way that you invest in the brand and in how you make it. So we have now 2 locations. We have our main location in Percival on Main Street, where we have the distillery, and then we have about 20 minutes away a warehouse space where we can store the barrels, and it's available for future growth. So that was kind of the plan, and as we grow, we have some of this same warehouse leased out to other people, but we can take it back when the time comes that we need it. So we have a mechanism. It's a challenging business, but it is possible to kind of very carefully navigate those growth things.
Yeah, the downside to this industry is it takes time.
Yes.
Time is not, you can't really speed up time, unfortunately, and
No.
that makes things difficult. But you touched on that. You got a couple of spots, but you got the main spot there. What can people expect when they get to visit the distillery or check it out?
Oh, it's really nice. We're on the main street of a town that was built. So our main building was built in 1921. So it's just over 100 years old, and it was a Buick dealership back at that time. So the tasting room was where the showroom was, and then there are double doors next to it where you can walk in. And that's where the distillery is now, where we have the stills, and where I ship out pallets of product onto Main Street, loaded onto trucks. But folks come in, they can have a flight. We have we're in Virginia, which is a control state, so this is not a bar. Virginia doesn't go for that. But what you can do is you can get a mini cocktail, you can get a flight of cocktails, or you can try the spirits neat. And then you're able to take home a bottle with you. We're located outside of DC, about an hour. It's in a part of Northern Virginia that is really a beautiful foothills kind of dotted with wineries and breweries. And so it's a really great place to come and explore the area. And, so we get a tremendous amount of tourism in, from the DC and Maryland area as well.
Well, it sounds like a perfect location. Nice little getaway for anyone,
Yes,
really.
100%.
And in addition to kind of what you do there at Catoctin, you're also part of the American Craft Distillers Association. Why is that so important to y'all, and what are they able to accomplish?
So I got involved with the American Craft Spirits Association, and one of the things that we are a nonprofit trade association that is owned by distilleries. So we have a dual mission. One is to educate folks and get them so that they're ready for what gets thrown at us as small business owners. So we have a technical track which talks about how you do the techniques of distilling and making good, consistent, delicious products. We also have a track that talks about, how do you do sales and marketing in this industry the way it is now, and how can you get your products to your customers. But the other piece that's really, kind of key and what we're unique in is that we also advocate for small independent distilleries. The industry as a whole is dominated by a handful of giant multinational corporations, right? They make an excellent product and they do really great stuff. But, the people that are out there trying to create new products are essentially, small business people. And we have everything stacked up against us. As the number of distilleries has increased due to economic trends and pressures led in the larger alcohol industry as a whole, the number of distributorships has shrunk. We are required by law to sell our products through a distributor. And so as you get more and more products coming out, distributors are swamped and they don't want to handle products that only sell maybe 5 or 10 cases a month. So it's a really, really difficult business process to make a small distillery go. And we have unique challenges that wineries and breweries aren't subject to, because the laws for wine and beer are very different than the laws for distilled spirits, probably and mostly because for so long since Prohibition, there have only been a couple hundred, less than a couple hundred distilleries in the US. So all the laws were written for multinational corporations, and they have not modernized to keep up with the whole way things are going. So it is extremely important for small distilleries then to work together to try to make our situation better. And as there are more of us, we have to kind of work to say, okay, how do we make things work? How do we get toward the kind of industry that small wineries operate in? You can go to Napa Valley and you can taste from wineries of all sizes, and you can have cases of product shipped home to you. Distilleries, that's not allowed. That is absolutely illegal. I cannot ship you a product of one of my bottles from the distillery if you pick it up here. You have to carry it home with you, which is really difficult for folks because most people don't, bagging checks, you don't want to carry it. And people don't understand the rules are different. And so there's really tough challenges ahead in the way that the industry is growing. And most small distilleries make less than 10,000 cases of product a year. So and that's a pretty big small distillery at 10,000 cases of product. Most people are making less than 1,000 cases of product a year. 90% of the craft distilleries are selling 80% of their product out their front door. Most of them don't ship products out by the pallet. They're mostly sending them out one bottle at a time with their customers. And for those people, the ability to ship products across the country, if somebody read that you made some amazing, whether it be a brandy or a whiskey or anything, and you read about it and you wanted to order it, and you could order it online and get it across the country shipped to your house, it would be transformative, because these small businesses then could prove to distributors, I can move product and it's worth bringing my product in because it's so good that California people are going to want to drink it, or people in Oregon are going to want to drink it. Right now, that's all off the table. So when you go to distributors outside of your home state, a lot of times they don't even want to talk to you. Why? Because they know that you're building a brand, and building a brand is slow, and it's something that their businesses are not set up to do. And so that's really one of the key things that I'm really passionate about, and that's one of the reasons I got involved with the association. So that's a little nerdy advocacy distiller stuff.
But it's so true, and it's something that every and others that might know this might not, but every state is different.
Every state is different, and all the rules are different, and so it's really, really tough when you're looking at a small business to even try to go to a couple other states, because you have to go read all those laws and figure out, okay, what do I have to do and how do I have to distribute here, even if you can get distribution. So, we want to make small businesses like mine able to be nimble and modern, and and we want, if we get some great press because of some product release that we have, we want people to be able to access it. I've been doing this a long time, and even though I have a very small distillery, and we're still in like the small size of distilleries, it's taken us a long time to get to where we're even in a majority of states. And most distilleries coming up and starting up right now are not getting those opportunities. And so I want to, as a person I want to grow this industry to be something that's more welcoming to small producers than it is now.
And of course be able to share those great bottles with anyone that wants them. And for those that are looking for those bottles, where can they find them of Catoctin Creek? Where are you guys distributed, and how can folks go about and get them?
We're available actually in most states now. We have a website. It's called buyvirginiarye.com. And if you go on there, you can find out whether or not, we're in your state, or you can order us from, I think we're working with Bar Cart, so they will ship it to your house. But we are in probably about 30 states now. So most places we're available. It's just a question of whether or not we're in your local. But if you go to catoctincreek.com, you can kind of see what states we're in. They have where to buy, and there's ways for you to find out where you can get a hold of us. But yeah, we're in a lot of states now, especially the big ones. We are available in California and Texas and Kentucky and Tennessee. We've got distributors a lot of places now. It's just a matter of kind of keeping people and getting people interested enough to ask for it. Because if you, as a consumer who loves products, if you ask for somebody's product at your local liquor store, that's the biggest boost you can do for a small producer, because that's something where that person at the liquor store will then say, well, I had somebody ask for it. I'm probably worth my time to buy it. And so I tell people all the time, even if you can ask for my product, that's great. But if you have other products you love from local producers, ask your local liquor stores or your bars and restaurants, hey, have you tried this? It's really great. And that's the kind of thing that really helps small businesses out a lot.
And then as we wrap this up, what's next for y'all? Obviously, I know you guys have been growing and so forth. What's next, and what's on the horizon?
We've got, we always have new releases coming out. So we've got, like I said, we have the Harper's Malt coming out. Right now I'm working on what the next iteration of the Ragnarok Rye is going to look like next year, because that's just fun. And we are continuing to kind of build the business steadily. And we just did a big equipment expansion last year. So we're, starting to use that to lay down a little more whiskey, get things caught up As everybody moved out of the pandemic years, there's people are getting out and about again and looking to go to bars and restaurants. So, we're doing more events where we're getting in whiskey shows and, doing things at different partners' places. So I'm going to be hitting the road next week for Florida again. And I've got a number of stops still this year before the end of the year as far as promoting the brand.
Well, I can't wait to see what you all have up your sleeves. And Becky, this has been a blast. And folks, Catoctin Creek, that's how you say it. Look it up, by virginiarye.com. And thanks so much for taking some time to talk whiskey with me.
Hey, thanks so much. I love talking whiskey.